And here we are again. Day 24, 365 Personal Transformation Project. We're covering James Allen's Man Thinketh. We're on Chapter 5, The Thought Factor in Achievement. And tonight, we're in for some exciting times. Because while we agree, and this is the point, that all that a man achieves and all that he fails to achieve is a direct result of his own thoughts. The premise we both agree on, James Allen and I. However, there have been some points since Allen wrote this in the early 1900s that there have been some advances, put it that way. And one wouldn't think so, because the way I've presented it so far, it's been just, well, this has been known since the time of Huna. And Huna is not the word for the knowledge. It really means the secret. It probably means there's different words that the Hawaiians describe this knowledge themselves. The problem with Huna is it wasn't really known until, or started to be broadly recognized until the 1979, when they took off the restrictions of beliefs. It was illegal to teach the subject in Hawaii or even speak it out loud until 79. And that's a whole legal thing that happened, which is great for us. Unfortunately, all this understanding of how the system worked, because they have the 7 principles, and the 7 principles I've covered in several many places, chiefly because of Sir Kelly King enabled us to give a very good essay, which he released to the world. And I publish that as many times as I can to tell people about these 7 principles. Now, that being said, we didn't have that datum until it was allowed to be talked about. So let's go through self-help as a subject. Okay, so we had this data way back when that wasn't known. Now, in the legends of the Huna, we'll use that term, of the ancient Polynesians, they actually helped, in their legends, helped these earlier religions form. And so that would explain why these 7 principles really show up through, and many of the other teachings of Huna really show up through all the basic religions on the planet, such as the Golden Rule, for instance. Now, our first breakthrough in actually getting into one central collated form of self-help, or of how this universe works, universal system, was through Thomas Troward, who studied all the major religions in their own language when he was a judge in provincial India. This was in the late 1880s. He had a long career, but when we started seeing his publishing, he gave a speech in Edinburgh, and then followed up with Dore lectures. Both of these became bestsellers in their own time, because he could distill all this data and then come out with commonalities of it. He produced it in a very Orthodox Christian format against those those teachings, which is fine because that's where he delivered it to, which was England. Now, coming forward from that, you'll see that a lot of people base their, and he's given to be one of the taproots of New Thought. And the law of attraction, all these Atkinson and James Allen and these others were under this big umbrella of New Thought. Of course, that is in the back of my book. I explain how this all works together. But let's take Troward as the key forward thought in this, a key point where all these studies were done and we distilled it down into a set of lectures. Okay, now he influenced, we know he influenced Master Key System by by Charles Hannell. And we presume that Wallace Wattles had access to this material, although there's no real proof of that. There is proof in Charles Hannell's thing. Now, he distilled it into 24 lessons, right? Napoleon Hill studied Hannell and gave credit for his success to Hannell. But he was the other breakthrough when he studied 500 people, 500 successes, major success. He actually studied far more people than that. It took him 20 years. He distilled it in the Law of Success. Then later on in 1937, he published Think and Grow Rich, which is what he's mostly known for. So that is the core distillation of all this material. To my studies, the only place where this has been furthered since then was the personal breakthrough that Lester Levinson did on his personal example of being able to apply releasing and codify that technique. Releasing has been known, it's mentioned in various places, but his was the personal example of reaching a high personal state with this material. Now then, with Huna being freed up, be made available, Max Freedom Long was publishing it in the 50s along with Levinson. Levinson's discoveries were in the 50s. The later stuff with Serge K. King and others, especially Daddy Bray, took many people under his wing to explain this thing. We won't go into Huna itself because there's branches and different ideas or families of this thought, these teachings. However, they all come back to the same basic points. So we have all the ancient texts, Huna, the ancient Polynesian stuff, and the ancient text, which has only survived with their language, which was Max Freedom Long's breakthrough. Okay, so that is really hidden from us. Then we had Thomas Troward, who put all this stuff together. Then Charles Hannell, who then distilled it further. Then we have Napoleon Hill, who then gave us our core book, which is like the runaway bestseller of all time. And that was really the greatest distillation. Now, in understanding Hill's work, we can then go backwards to these other things, but then come forward to start reading the Huna material that's released. Okay, now, got all that? This is all the history of self-help and why and how it's effective and who to study. Now, when we read James Allen, we still have this point of strong versus weak and slaves and oppressors, and all of these really the same point, which is, he says, if you straighten out your thoughts, then you can get your strength back. You're no longer the oppressor, you're no longer the slave, right? Because each person's life is exactly what it was, what he's thinking about, which is, of course, goes back to the Huna, the world is what you think it is. Now, his other point is that there's no achievement without sacrifice. However, this is from the world of the early 1900s, right? The mechanistic, the effort was required at that time to make a living, and the general consensus that, like Malthus and his lies, where he decided that you couldn't really support the entire planet on what we have. We couldn't grow enough to keep the whole planet running. And he was the first chair of economics, and it's gone downhill since then. And that's just like the Wright brothers. They told him he couldn't fly because all the materials composed, same math that Malthus used, same basic points, that if you take all this stuff together, they can't feed the world's population. You can't fly because all the materials you're using will, in aggregate, make a thing that's too heavy to get off the ground. There's no engine that could power something at that amount of weight and still raise it off the ground, right? And so on and so on and so on. Buckminster Fuller says we've actually had the technology and distribution lines to feed the world since just after World War II, right? So much for economics. Now, where we're going to in that sets the stage for where Alan was coming from. Knowing what we know about releasing, knowing what we know about Huna, we now know a much easier, more practical, and faster approach to improving anybody's life and having them be able to achieve anything they want in the world, right? There's a great deal of unlearning to do, and that's not surprising. There's a great deal of being able to straighten out one's mind from all this bad training and bad learning and what's constantly reinforced with the news and with our conventional thinking these days. That has always been the challenge from time immemorial, right? Yesterday we covered this bell curve of purpose, right? And that's what you're fighting against when you do this. However, with Levinson, then you understand that anybody can just release the various factors which keep you trained into these thoughts, and so it will speed up the process immensely. And if you compare then Levinson with the talks on Zen by Adam Watts, right? Then you can see that there are points where a person could reach a high level, which we could call clear, we could call it enlightenment, we could call it satori, within minutes if they wanted to. Given all that, right? The point of these are the tools we have to work with, and this is what we can do now. Now we can take the simple thought of Alan and say that yes, you can acquire anything you want, anything and everything you want. You know, now of course, provided you have an ethical base for it. You can't just go willy-nilly, and this is the whole thing the Golden Rule teaches, which really goes back to the whole point that's in Huna, that we are all connected. There are no limits between you and I, right? And then releasing Levinson, if you read his materials, he actually comes right back around to this whole point. And this is where the big breakthroughs are, because Levinson then went back into Eastern philosophy again to try to understand the state that he'd gotten into, right? So there we have it. We have now all the body, for the first time, because of our internet age, we can access all this material and stand on the shoulders of these giants, see much further than we ever have before. Not only that, we can walk. We can take the giant steps, and we can outstep the giants in the speed of application of this material. We are sitting on the point of having world peace anytime we want it. Just that's the magnitude of what we're dealing with. There is no reason for anybody not to have an abundant life now. There's no reason for anybody not to have complete freedom to do and be and achieve and acquire anything they want. There's actually no reason except what that person has decided to take as a limit. And I go over this, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and this just brought it home to me, that all we're doing, if we're having problems, is we're creating the problems to have. You see where I'm going with this? Okay, now, I've given you, when I read this, it just sparked it off. And I'm sorry, I'll get it, hopefully there'll be a bigger blog post on it when I get to the blogging on this. But it's just the limits that James Allen had, we no longer have. And it's only been 100 years since then. But the breakthroughs we've had in 100 years have been amazing. If you go from the 1880s to now to 2012, and what we've seen and what we've uncovered, and what we've developed, all you have to do is get this all in one place and start studying it for yourself. And this is why I'm doing it, and this is why I get excited about this. Amazing stuff. We have 2 more chapters of James Allen to do, and I hope my head doesn't explode from all this incredible stuff. Get the duct tape out, because I don't think I've ever put that succinctly in one statement before. And those are the key people to study, and that's the key tools, the techniques to absorb. And we're on our way now, boy. It can't be, nobody can hold you back. Okay? Thanks.